Mr. Wilson. I don't have to take that kind of talk from anyone.
That's right, you don't. How about going outside and trying to kick me around?
I'm not supposed to fight with the guests, Mr. Wilson.
I'm not a guest tonight, you yellow bastard. I happen to be an intruder.
So I think that's how my wife actually serves me my beer. Yeah, so that'll do it for Memento. I want to thank Ryan as Weird AI for the theme song.
You're so
and
welcome.
Next week we'll be talking about Tenet. Just kidding. It's the Good, the Pod, and the Ugly podcast where we pair movies to garner a better understanding of the filmographies of notable directors and actors, typically one per season, often with guests. I am your co-host, Ken.
Thomas, host, co-other, your, am I, and?
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, and I'm your other co-host, Thomas.
You may know us from our other podcast, 20 Minute Men, where one of us will assign a film to the other two, and they haven't seen before, and they have to watch the middle 20 minutes of that film. And then we ask questions about how they think it started, how they think it ended, and do a fun quiz. Usually when I do those other podcasts, they're like stupid. But when I came up with this one, I was like, that's a pretty good idea.
That is actually a really good idea. Maybe you want to listen to that one instead. But if you're stuck here with us, we do a deep dive on the creators' paired films and their backgrounds, and we had our own insights. We started in the first 3 seasons with Eastwood, but who are we talking about this season, Ken? And what are the films we're going to be watching this week?
We are doing the films of Sir Christopher Nolan, recent Oscar winner, King of Hollywood. We are doing a temporal pincer movement, kind of our trademark way of looking at directors. And we got the name from one of the movies we're talking about paired up this week. We're talking about his second film, Memento, and his second to last film that he's made, Tenet. And this week we're talking about Memento.
But before we get there, these films have some stuff in common. Nope, they don't. No, yeah, of course.
Just a few things in common. Oh, we're joined by Ryan.
Hello.
If you got my stupid joke at the beginning, that was supposed to be the ending because it's Memento, but you already knew that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, he forgot it as well.
I was paying attention. I was engaged.
So written on your right forearm, Ryan, it says Ken and Thomas co-hosts.
Yes.
In case you forget our names.
I'm not going to tell you the footnotes about what it says about each of you. But okay. I will let you know that I've recently had my right arm tattooed in a sleeve that reminds me about all of your each of your negative qualities.
Just one arm?
Well, it's your arm, Ken, and my other one's mine, and it's completely blank.
Uh-huh.
Freshly lasered. So before we get into more jokes about Memento and tattooing, both of these films have bullet holes in glass. Both of them have protagonists whose main supporting dude is someone who's lived with the protagonist for longer than the protagonist knows, and therefore knows him better than he should. And their supporting dudette is a chick who has a husband murdered during the course of the film by the actions of the protagonist. Is your mind blown yet? Because in beboth, people comment on the protagonist's suit.
Mm-hmm.
Both
Holy
began
shit.
filming before a globe-changing event. I don't really care about 9/11 so much, but it would be fun to talk about COVID during the next film.
Mm-hmm.
Both might be the biggest and smallest multipliers for any of Nolan's films.
Mm-hmm.
Both protagonists believe that they are the protagonists of the situation, but are being used by someone with an outside understanding of the situation. Both protagonists are in pursuit of a man whom they've never met and only have a name. Both may be considered dead to the world, or at least operating under an assumed name or identities. Both may have completed the quest before the movie began. And both end with someone in a car and the movie inverted with people made safe or unsafe without knowing how the protagonist has set himself up for those actions in the movie we just watched. That's a little bit of a cheat, but they both end in cars, so that makes that.
Holy cow. Well done, Thomas.
And maybe this is maybe I'm jumping the gun or skipping ahead too far. I would say that they both have protagonists who, by the end of the film, you could argue are actually the villains of their story, and I think they both have the exact same idea about time. I think Tenet's almost a redo thematically of Memento. Not that there's anything wrong with Memento, but it's just the same material tackled from a different vantage point, I think.
Wow. So stay tuned for next week's pairing with Memento, because Ryan's got some burning takes there on Tenet.
Woo. Can't wait for that. Gotta wait a whole week for that shit.
It's not, well, yeah, we'll get into it.
Both of these also have 2s and 0s for the release date, because Memento was released in 2000, except for in the States, where it was released in 2001 for reasons we'll talk about shortly. So in year 2000, if you were in the States, you could watch Space Cowboys or Requiem for a Dream in preparation for listening to The Good, the Pod, the Ugly 18 years in the future. I guess 20 years in the future. We started in 2020 ourselves, didn't we? We didn't cover Reindeer Games, unfortunately. Though Nolan cites John Frankenheimer's Seconds as inspiration for both Memento and the following, at least the looks. And he credits James Wong Howe's handheld work as like a strong inspiration for both.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, big fan of Seconds.
Yeah, I can see that.
So did you guys see this when it came out in theaters?
Yes.
No.
Thomas? Okay.
I would have if I had known who Nolan was in the future. I would have sent somebody back in time to tell myself to do so. But in the States, you wouldn't be able to watch this in the year 2000. You had to wait to the year 2001 for some reasons I can go into later. But no, I didn't see this in the theaters when it initially came out.
Okay.
You?
Yeah. This was the one that when I watched it, I was like, this Christopher Nolan kid, he's going to be a knight someday. And I have been a follower ever since.
Yeah. Did you see it at the Coin Tower?
I don't remember. It was 2001, so it would have been in Portland. I don't remember where I saw it.
So Wikipedia doesn't have much information about the release, but I remember my roommate was working at the Coin Tower at the time, and we were seeing all the movies for free. And if I remember correctly, this movie played Sundance and did okay, and then played the Portland International Film Festival and won the Audience Award. And then it opened at the Coin Center and sold out for like a month. And then it spread to the rest of the country. Like, this is the rare movie where Portland was coincidentally central to its catching on as a national phenomena.
Huh. I worked, Coin Center Cinemas was my first job when I moved to Portland in 94, 95.
Oh.
And I was a relief manager at the Guild Theater. And once a year, they would have that Portland International Film Festival instead of second run and sticky seats for like 2 weeks when I was there 2 nights a week. The biggest assholes in Portland would come in and watch these stupid fucking movies.
Yeah.
But I digress.
This movie, screenplay based off of an idea that Christopher and Jonah Nolan, Chris and Jonah had on a car ride. Has like the movie itself has a very strange distribution portion to it, which goes into like indie filmmaking and maybe the death of it in a way that I want to talk about maybe after our plot and other parts, was we're hard to like figure out, is this really an independent movie? Because there's some weird discussion around there. But what had happened was Newmarket Capital had done the financing for it. They're the people who, like The Usual Suspects and Dead Man, they helped get off the ground in 95. And they weren't distributors, right? They're a production company. The producers at this time would be, or like the distributors really for this type of film would be like Miramax or New Line. But they'd had screenings after the film was shot, and they already had the foreign rights. That was part of the financing. So the movie was being distributed overseas. But in the States, they had 3 screenings and it was passed over like for distribution. I think one person came up with a very lowball number but they ended up not having anyone to distribute this film starting in March 2000. So the producing team, they call them Team Todd. It's Jennifer and Suzanne Todd, they're sisters. Started to talk to Newmarket Capital about, well, shit, can we just distribute this ourselves? And so this would be the first film that Newmarket Capital distributed. The second one was Donnie Darko. So they would produce and distribute the film Donnie Darko, which didn't do well, and they blame that because it came out in October 2001, and typically you start with a few screens and you grow bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And then in September 2001, something terrible happened.
Involving an airplane.
Involving a plane, yeah.
Yeah, Donnie Darko has an important plot involving a plane. That makes sense.
They thought that it didn't do that well because movie theaters weren't really interested in showing it.
Yeah.
Or people seeing that.
People wanted hobbits.
And Supermodel Spies.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite based off of the author of Bret Easton Ellis's work, but enough that he could sue them for stealing his idea. Is that
wait.
That's Zoolander? That's Zoolander stuff, right?
Is it?
I think so.
Bret Easton Ellis had an idea? Wow. Well done, sir.
Hold off.
Technically, that was his third idea, Ken.
So yeah, this movie, when it did get released in the States, opened up against Exit Wounds, which is Steven Seagal and I think DMX, right?
Wait, is Wounds? Is it with a Z?
I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it started the second week. It had 15 screens, and then it jumped to 76 in the third week. And then Miramax called Newmarket and was like, "Oh, we'll buy that after all." And they're like, "No, you can fuck off." And by May 2001, it would have 531 screens that it'd be showing at. That's big. And it was like a word of mouth style hit. It would continue playing for like most of the rest of the year of 2001 because the DVD came out in the States on 4 September 2001.
Mm-hmm.
While it was still playing in the theaters.
How very modern of them.
Well, they didn't actually. No, it wasn't actually like a Soderbergh thing where he's going to release, what was it, Bubble at the same time as like in video streaming and DVD at the same time. They didn't think it was going to be in theaters for that long. And it was like it just became this big hit and it stuck around. Did you guys watch it streaming or did you go to the hard media?
I watched it streaming.
Yeah, this one we streamed.
Mm-hmm.
Then you missed out on the DVD, not just the Easter egg where they show the film chronologically, but they have the website on the DVD.
Wow.
Wait, what website?
So there was a website, OTNEMEM.com.
Uh-huh.
Memento backwards. that Jonah Nolan created. He learned like code and created a website to tie his short story into the movie and as promotion for the movie because, again, as just a distribution company, Newmark Capital didn't really have any way of doing promotion. They weren't like Miramax at the time, who got bought out by Disney and could just produce, like have a large budget. I think the budget for Pulp Fiction for the marketing was like $8 to $10 million on a movie that cost $8 million to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have these deep pockets. What they did was they had Christopher Nolan, had Jonathan create a website, and then they had, as part of like the press junket and Toronto and other film festivals, postcards made that looked like Polaroids, and in the back had the website on it. To send people to the website, because the Blair Witch Project in '99 had great success using the web to market to people. And at this time, I think it was 54% of Americans had logged on to the internet. So this is like a wild time where like physical media still mattered, People weren't fully on, like, Ain't It Cool News, I guess, came out like in 94. But like people were still slowly switching over to a digital world. And the marketing is like this weird mix match. In fact, the craziest thing is that they sent out postcards with a photo. Let me see if I can find with the actual. They sent out postcards and that just had like, so they randomly bulk mailed Polaroids to unsuspecting homeowners. Each depicted the shot of a topless and blood-smeared Leonard pointing to his chest after repeatedly killing John G. So one of the people on the team said, they sent out a boatload of these things. I got a call one day from a woman who had no idea what it was. All it said was Memento spelled backwards. That was it. And of course, the picture of a half-naked bloody man pointing at his chest. She assumed she was being stalked and filed a report. The police traced it back to us and found out it was a movie. That's the grassroots publicity that really helped us. So that was from courtesy of James Mottram, The Making of Memento. It's a book that he wrote in 2002, like right after this movie came out. And it's really fascinating because only thing you really had was you had Following in this to like look at where Nolan might go later.
Yeah, you could definitely see structurally where he would go later. But that is interesting because we've talked about Aronofsky. Like there was this moment in film where like all these young guys, they were able to come up, make independent movies, and then make a small leap and then make a bigger leap, and to generally maintain their own brand, so to speak, throughout their careers. And it was a fun time, and that has been supplanted by someone making an indie movie and then just getting hired by Disney and getting lost in the churn of that machine of making IPs. And Nolan was definitely one of the late guys that came up in that era, I would say.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's coming up in an era, like one of the things that's a different source that I read mentions is that one of the reasons he was at Slamdance was because what had happened is you had this indie boom, and all of a sudden you couldn't get into Sundance. Sundance in 1987 had 60 films submitted to it, and over 800 by 97. So in 10 years, it had over, 12x as many films coming in. So they established Slamdance in 95 and limited submissions to, and they started getting 450 submissions to that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's a part of the marketing of your film was to send it to Sundance if it was of a certain tier.
Yeah, those were different times. Those are the days, my friend. We thought they'd never end.
So this movie had a 25.5 day shoot. It was supposed to be a little bit longer and take place in Canada, but when they moved it back to the States, they had to shave, I think, 3 or 4 days off of it to come in under budget.
Makes sense.
And they didn't know whether they were going to be able to do that or not, come in under budget. Nolan was an unknown, right? And Nolan thinks that this is his, like, people ask whether or not, like, it was a hard thing for him to go do The Dark Knight. I don't have the direct quote, but he was asked if it was like hard to do The Dark Knight, like to take this level up. I'm sorry, not Dark Knight, but Batman Begins, to like level up to the studio system. And he said no, like the biggest jump he ever had in his life was going from Following, where he was shooting on the weekends with amateur actors and he was behind the camera, to this film where he wasn't behind the camera and had to trust somebody else to do that and had professional actors. We had a meeting with Brad Pitt, which is one of the reasons that this film almost got, I mean, one of the reasons this film probably got made is because the buzz around. Well, you know, whenever you have a meeting with Brad Pitt at this time, I mean, this is Fight Club era, like people start to have a greater interest in your film.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. What a great movie to be your calling card. I mean, everything that happened afterwards kind of makes sense from this movie more than the one we did a couple weeks ago, The Following. Yeah, it's kind of all here, isn't it? Just like in Following was like a little petri dish, and this is like more of a full-grown
infection.
I don't know how the people on IMDb, they had to go through every single trivia for all the Christopher Nolan movies and put Sir in front of his name. Insane. Unless he did it himself.
I I certainly wouldn't put him past him hiring someone to do it.
Yeah. Maybe an AI did it.
I mean, with your knighthood should come the squire or something that does this for you.
Yeah.
Well, so we could talk more about the film. Do you want to give us a plot synopsis, Ken?
You mean the plot synopsis that I did not work on at all? Yeah. I did not write anything for it. I'm just going to freeball it.
Off the dome.
Wow.
It's going to be terrible. I apologize to fans of Memento. I am a fan of the movie. Whenever you want me to start, I'll start.
Oh, are we timing you again?
No, you don't have to time me. But, take a Polaroid and the time it takes for it to develop or undevelop, the case may be. I think your dog is barking in the background. He's upset that I didn't write a synopsis, is what I'm gathering.
Yeah, he really wants off his leash. He's going to come attack again.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Memento.
While we're talking over each other, I'm just going to take one moment to see what's going on and maybe put my dog down.
Oh, shit. For a nap, folks. I mean, when my dogs interrupt the podcast, I feel like killing them, but I never would.
No.
So Thomas is a true champion of the podcast if he's going to kill his dog. So I'll stop barking and interrupt the recording.
Oh, wait. No, I wasn't going to kill him. I just went and insulted him a lot. What do you mean? What are you guys talking about? I went and put him down.
Nothing at all. All right. And that's the synopsis of Memento. You missed it, Thomas. Yeah, sure. Okay, let me go. Memento. Stop me if you've heard this before. Christopher Nolan with parallel timelines. One's in black and white, and one's in color. The black and white one is linear into the future, so it has.
Hey, podcast people. This is Bill, friend of Ken. Ken told me that he really fucked up the Memento synopsis for the movie. So he asked me if I could write something up and maybe record it for him. I'm not one for movies, really. They didn't show much in the pen, but I gave it my best shot. So here's my synopsis of Memento. In the dimly lit alleys off memory's darkest streets, we encounter Leonard, a man haunted by the specters of his past, entangled in a web of deceit and self-deception. As we journey backward through fractured time, each revelation plunges us deeper into the shadows of his fractured psyche. With each enigmatic clue, we are drawn into a labyrinth of half-truths and misdirections, where the line between ally and adversary blurs, like the flickering neon lights on a rain-soaked street. Yet amidst the chaos of his shattered memories, Leonard seeks solace in his quest for vengeance, a quest fueled by the burning embers of a forgotten past. But as the pieces of the puzzle fall into place, we come to realize that the true enemy may lie within, in the darkest recesses of Leonard's own mind. And in the end, as the curtain falls on this noir tale of fractured identities and twisted truths, we are left to ponder the ultimate mystery. Can we ever truly escape the shadows of our own making? Thank you. So, what'd you think, Ken?
What did I think? I thought it was terrible. What the fuck? I thought you went to celebrity acting prison boot camp. Give me that.
No, don't talk shit about Brian Austin Green.
Fucking recording. Parole officer. Oh, my nuts! Why are you grabbing my nuts? Not remember to keep continuing down this chaotic path to finding his wife's killer. That was the worst one I've ever done.
Well, good thing you're editing. You can just go in.
I'm editing, yeah.
just run it backwards. It's funny that you said something about Seinfeld, because in the book, The Making of Memento, as already noted, Chris had read the Amos novel, Time Zero, but had neither seen Pinter's play nor indeed the episode of the U.S. comedy Seinfeld that ran backwards, and claims not to even been aware of them at the time.
No.
If I had, I would have never done it, because you would have said, well, someone's done that. That's part of the creative process for me. I don't watch other films or read too many other books. You just you just dive into your own mind. So if he was a Seinfeld fan, we might not have this film.
Holy shit.
Seinfeld is too funny for my dude. I mean, let's be real.
This might be his funniest film, right?
Oh yeah, I remember, the scene where he's running.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember in a sold out audience, I think it was at the movie house, it might have been. But I remember the entire crowd bursting out laughing, and what a release it was, because the story is so grim. It starts out with Joey Pants getting killed, and then we go back and find out all the tragic reasons how we got to that point. It's really funny. Guy Pearce does his voiceover, and it's deadpan. Probably the funniest scene in all of Christopher Nolan's movies, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I mean, the voiceover, they do it what? They do it in third person, right? Like, it's the you, or second person, like, you're doing this. Yeah, it's so great. It's like, okay, you're chasing this guy. Nope, he's chasing me. He also, at one point, gets like a 6 and a 9 backwards. He goes into the wrong room.
Yeah.
Because it's upside down.
He's going to have his assistant do AI on our podcast every time we call him Nolan or Chris, because we're pals. They're going to edit in Sir
Chris.
Sir Chris.
So yeah, I've seen this movie, I guess, about 3 times, though I have not watched it in the theaters. And it's hard to express like how good this film is. I was trying to figure out why I like it so much better than Black Swan. And I, you know what? I think this is a really sad, tragic film. And I guess for Nolan, it might be the one that connects the most, I think, just emotionally between some of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
There's something really amazing about having the two people widow. I don't know what it is, if both a guy and a gal are widowed, but they both have lost their spouse in bed together, right? Like, her husband's just died because he killed her, him. And his wife may or may not be dead. I guess that's something to talk about. But they're both like have this sense of mourning together. And there's something really smart about the film as well, despite it being like a noir, where it's kind of asexual.
Well, most Nolan movies are until Oppenheimer.
Yeah. Oppenheimer is also asexual. Just because there is sex in the movie doesn't mean it's not. Oh, you can edit that right out. That's fine.
No, say it again a little clearer, though. I want the ba-dum-dum.
Oh.
Yeah, Thomas, I think you're onto something with the human connection between the viewer and the movie, and you feel for Guy Pearce, who looks a lot like David Bowie in some shots, which is kind of weird.
Well,
a young Guy Pearce would have made a good Bowie.
Well, Guy Pearce and Bowie have the same agent at the time, and that's how they're able to use Bowie's song for the end credits.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That also probably helped with getting Bowie in The Prestige later.
So was Bowie's agent confused? Guy Pearce's photo came across I'm his agent, and he just thought it was David Bowie, and that's how Guy Pearce got his start.
That is fact.
Okay.
I'm editing the Wikipedia right now. That is.
Yep. His their agent, Mr. Magoo.
Well, the other weird connection thing that happened was that originally, I'm blanking on his name. The guy from the Ref and the main guy, Dennis Leary. Yeah,
Dennis Leary.
Was supposed to play the Joey Pants part, but I think when Joey Pants came on, then he was able to get Carrie-Anne Moss from The Matrix to come on as well.
Ah, really?
And because those two were in it, they were able to get European distribution rights because people are like, oh, we love The Matrix. Those two people are above the title, then we'll distribute this film.
Oh, that makes sense.
That does make sense. Carrie-Anne Moss, it is my favorite performance of hers. She kind of went away for a while, didn't she? To raise kids and whatnot. But her scene when she is goading Guy Pearce into hitting her, amazingly written scene, an amazingly performed scene. Probably some of the most anger and vitriol in almost any Nolan film that she has in that scene. Because she's somebody who she knows he killed Dodd, and that's why he's wearing his stuff. But she also knows that he doesn't remember anything. and she just winds him up. He hits her, she goes outside, and then by the time she comes back in, she's like, somebody beat me up. Go to me doing something else.
Yeah, because there's no voice memos. He doesn't have the David Lynch voice recorder, right? Like, he's not Twin Peaksing it. He doesn't have a Diane. He has to have a pen, and she defeats him by taking away the pen, which is pretty amazing. Like, he can't write anything down. I mean, like, he didn't try lipstick or eyeliner or other stuff. I guess they could get smudged. But yeah, he doesn't have a phone with like be able to like send himself a text message later. I think she's amazing in this because when you first see her in the diner scene and then you see her later in bed with him, you still think, because we were watching this movie somewhat in reverse, that she's like she has less agency than what she actually does. I think it's amazing how working class she changes how she holds herself as well, right? Because I think when the first time you see her, she seems like a person in a film still. Like, how do I mean that? Maybe she's like holding herself in a way that you would expect a female lead to hold themselves in the film. She has a certain, I don't know, ambiguous classness to her. But when she's behind the bar, and when she's in that scene where she leaves and comes back in from the car after he's lost his memory to set him up, she's just fucking cold-blooded, like working class gun mole. Like she's a completely different person, and it's great because, yeah, it sets you up in the film to be to believe her to be one thing when she's not.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to edit this in. I'm going to do another synopsis real quick. All right. So, Memento, 2001. It's like Irreversible, but for humans. There you go. I don't know how anybody could watch Irreversible more than once. Speaking of movies told backwards.
Yeah, I could never. The synopsis was enough for me on that one.
Anyway, but the Seinfeld episode told backwards, I've seen a million times. I have Pinter's a copy of his play, Betrayal, and I'm a fan of the movie. So I'm a big fan of stuff told backwards. And Memento is right up there with the best. It's a tough nut to crack. And he gets a lot of mileage out of really saying, well, how would this be like? And what would you do other than the Twin Peaks thing, which would have been obvious, but that would have changed the narrative. And it's so very clever to get you to the point at the end where, are we sure that he doesn't remember anything and can't create new memories? Because he seems to be purposely fooling himself.
Yeah. So that's the question I wanted to ask Ryan. Yeah. Because how much is Leonard operating at a bad faith? Because I think there's probably an overlap with Oppenheimer as well.
Mm-hmm.
How much is the protagonist acting in bad faith?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Here?
Leonard.
Yes.
The protagonist.
I think Leonard is a villain. I think Leonard is the antagonist of this film. Antagonist, it doesn't really work because obviously we spend all of the time with him, so it's not like he's not the main focus. But I think he is the evil force driving everything that happens in this movie, and he's a cold-blooded killer. Because
he burns a book? That's how you know. That's how you know somebody's evil.
Uh-huh.
That is a good kick the dog type move in our modern times. But no, I think he makes reference to the conditioning, and we see it with the constant rubbing of every time he rubs remember Sammy Jenks tattoo on his hand. It's my belief that he is repeating the story of Sammy Jenks, which helps him. Every time he does that, he's changing his own past to change the future, which is the central, I think, one of Nolan's central ideas, and is at play both here and Tenet. But yeah, I think he's a villain who is constantly rewriting his own history so that he can pretend that he is the good guy in the present, but he is vaguely aware at all times that he's actually the villain of his own story.
So in your scenario there, does Sammy Jenkins, is he real?
Yeah, well, no, I think because doesn't he say at the end that he is real, but it just went very differently? Like everything that he says happened to Sammy after the accident is actually what happened to him.
So the only thing that would be in common then was that Sammy Jenkins had some type of mental condition, short-term memory, or unable to create long-term memory, potentially.
But he was a con man.
Yeah.
Is what Joey Pants says. Sammy was just a con man. All that stuff about the insulin, that was him. That was Guy Pearce.
Yeah, exactly.
So is he remembering that Sammy Jenkins is a con man, or is he remembering what we see in the film? It's black and white.
The story he tells in the film, in the black and white sections, is his mnemonic device that he uses to rewrite his own history through conditioning.
Okay. It's a construction.
Yeah. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my impression anyways.
Yeah, because if he's telling the story and it's really him, then his thing about not being able to create new memories is a lie.
Well, there's a couple things that I think are going on. He talks about how you can't create new memories, but you can use conditioning to organize your life. And he does that with with the tattoos. It's all part of the same habit approach to building. He's replacing the ability to form memories with the ability to form habits. Basically. But then there's also the thing where his condition didn't kick in till much later than what he says about Sammy Jenks, right? Because it actually wasn't the accident that triggered his... Well, now I'm confusing myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I love about this film, and it's complete over the other one, is that the particulars don't fully matter. Because there's a moment where he also has the flashback that his wife's alive and he has the tattoos on his body. And he has a tattoo that says something about that he had done, like the spot that he was going to reserve for whenever he killed his killer.
Yeah.
Is filled in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think what's amazing about the film is that you're watching a film that is really tragic because to my mind, he can't remember that he set himself up fully. And so the question then becomes, like, how much did he know that he could set himself up to continue to live the fantasy of revenge because he has nothing else? It's a lot more tragic in the short story by his brother because it's like you have even less memory recall.
I agree with I think everything you're saying is very interesting, Thomas. The only thing that I would take issue isn't even the right term. I think that what they're pointing out is this is how memory works, period, for everyone. And they're just using this example of his condition to show how we all sabotage ourselves in life. Which is why I think it's such a tragic, which is why I think the narrative hits so hard, because we can each see something in Guy Pearce's story that's similar to our own lives, you know? So, we can get more into this in Tenet, but I can unpack a little bit about the changing the past to change the future idea, because I think it kind of relates. If that's cool with you guys,
yeah. Stay tuned for that next week, folks.
So there's this podcast called Why Theory, and they talk about philosophy and psychoanalysis as it relates to pop culture. And they're the ones who put me onto this idea of Nolan's big theme being changing the past to change the future. And it comes out of work that Freud did. Freud encountered PTSD. He was the first person to diagnose post-traumatic stress disorder. And what he noticed about PTSD is it's unique in that so like the classic example of like this is something that actually happened in my life. I had a teacher in middle school who was a Vietnam vet, and we were at baseball tryouts, and the pitcher threw the ball and the catcher didn't catch it, and it hit the fence behind the front plate. And the teacher tackled his son, who was standing next to him and was also one of the kids trying out, and started yelling, "Everybody get down, they're firing." You know, he had a full post-traumatic episode on the baseball field. And what Freud noticed about these situations is there was nothing traumatic about him being on the baseball field, and there was nothing traumatic about the knowledge that he had been in Vietnam. But then once that event happens, both the baseball field becomes traumatic, and the event that he was remembering in his mind, thinking he was reliving, is also now a traumatic memory. So you have something in the future that happens to you that is totally normal until it triggers this memory of the past that you didn't even know was upsetting to you until you have this trigger. And now your present and your past are both different because of the psychological trigger. So out of that idea, Freud came up with this idea that if you want to change your future behavior, you have to change how you remembered the past. And I think this is what's going on in Memento and Tenet, and I think a lot of his other movies. As we get in to these next 10, I think this is like an ongoing thing he's going to return to. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Oh, that was great. Hey, did either of you see the, speaking of Jonathan Nolan, who also works with his wife, Lisa Joy, their movie Reminiscence with Wolverine came out during the pandemic, I think in 2021.
I was really excited about it, but I heard it was awful.
It's a fucking piece of shit. But it does interestingly deal with memory and time and the same things you were just talking about, Ryan, in a really bad way.
He goes to space, right? At the end in a bubble with his head shaved.
Yeah.
I think
yes, that's the one.
Yeah. The masterpiece, Reminiscence by Darren Aronofsky.
And his wife, Lisa Joy. Apparently their adaptation of the video game Fallout is quite good on Amazon. Everybody seems to like it. So good for the Nolan boys having success.
Yeah, they're good ones.
I think the saddest person in this movie in many ways is Joey Pants's character, right?
Yeah.
Because he's
Poor
like,
Joey
he's
Pants.
Because what's great is that he had said that he thought that maybe Nolan didn't want to cast him originally because he was too sinister or came off as kind of too smarmy.
Really?
Smarmy. Yeah, and but
that's
great
what
because
works
it works
so
against
well.
type because you don't really trust him as an audience member, at least as a viewer for myself. You're like, that something's wrong. Like that guy's not on the up and up, and he's not. But he's also like the best. Like if Leonard's going to go out and kill people anyway, potentially, he's like the best person to help him out. And he's even telling him throughout this, like, it's not going to help you, man. Like, it's not going to make you feel better. Like, trust me, this isn't going to work out.
You
and
already did it.
And so he doesn't stop him, which would be like the most honorable thing to do. But at the same time, it seems like maybe he's not able to be stopped, or Joey needs to get rid of some people. And so instead of using somebody who's like a hired killer or killing somebody himself, he's using somebody who won't remember doing it. And so it's not, in a way, it's like in a really shitty situation, he's the best they're both the best people for each other, but he's the person who gets set up to be killed.
Yeah. I thought that was so poetic because I don't, like some of the other stuff we've discussed, it's not that it's exactly clear, but what I think is going on with Teddy is, he sees that Leonard is obsessed after the initial trauma that Leonard experiences. And so he thinks like, maybe he even debates like the ethics of vigilante justice, but for whatever reason, he decides to help Leonard go through with it. And then he realizes that Leonard is not going to remember. And then there's a realm where Teddy is just in a never ending guilt spiral for the rest of his life, where he's created this monster. He's helped create this monster. And now he's the only person who could potentially control it and direct the murderous energy. So he's got to feel responsible for all this, and just that he sticks with it is like really, really tragic, I think. Not that he
wait,
is
so
a good
Teddy's
dude,
Oppenheimer?
So if you didn't get it from my brilliant synopsis, Joey Pants did help Guy Pearce track down the person who perpetrated the crime a year earlier, helped him kill the guy, and took a Polaroid picture afterwards, where as the great viral marketing campaign had a Polaroid of Guy Pearce pointing at his chest where that tattoo is supposed to go. And Guy Pearce burns that photo at some point during the course of the story, either backwards or forwards, because he doesn't want to remember that, right?
Now, did his wife get murdered, or was she just assaulted? Like, I guess that's
I think she was assaulted,
and she died later. Was
from the diabetes thing? Yeah, he
that's
diabetes.
when he got his amnesia. Is when she was assaulted, and he was assaulted as well. Like he would have had the short term.
It just occurs to me, maybe our confusion. Maybe Ken, you were right. Maybe it is. Maybe maybe Leonard's condition is psychological, and that is when he talks about that with Sammy Jenks. Maybe that's actually maybe the trauma of killing his wife triggered this condition, and it is psychological. And that's why he is able to remember what actually happened, but has used this conditioning about Sammy Jenks to reprogram himself, because on some level it's not an actual neurological problem, just like it wasn't with the Sammy Jenks in the story anyway. I don't know. That just occurred to me. It might be hogwash.
No, that sounds about right. I mean, whether or not he does remember, I guess it's like the spinning top at the end of Inception.
Yeah.
It's kind of left up to the viewer a little bit, which is fine. Gets people talking after the movie, right?
Oh yeah, I think it's great.
And speaking of confused moviegoers, we'll be discussing Tenet next week.
Yeah. Love that one.
I thought your dog was going to give a review. My dog was really confused by Tenet because he only has like a 10-minute memory.
After my getting up in my feels about Oppenheimer last week, I want to, if it's all right, I'd like to just take a moment to say that I think this is a perfect movie. I think everything is, I don't think there's anything you could do to make this movie better. There's no wasted time. Like, every scene is essential.
No.
You don't think?
Keep going, and I'll say why.
Even when Jenny and I were rewatching it the other night, we both were thinking that the black and white bits were a little bit clunky and kind of the only thing that didn't sit well. But then when you get that merging of the timelines at the end, it like somehow the clunkiness earlier makes that pay off even sweeter. And it's just like, it's got the efficiency of like a Carpenter movie. You know, so few filmmakers in the modern era can deliver a story as tight and perfectly told as this is, I think.
Thomas?
I think one interesting thing in this film, which isn't tight in it, and Nolan was really concerned about, that somebody was going to have him cut it out, is the prostitute scene. So there's a whole scene where he puts up the decoration and he has the prostitute come in. And it doesn't really do anything to add to the film, according to Nolan himself. But he thought it was there for emotional resonance.
Yes. I think that's maybe a telling thing about the difference between Jonah and Christopher is I would argue that that's maybe the most essential scene for getting with Leonard. But I'm sorry to interrupt, Thomas.
Oh no, it just he says like, but also the other part to it isn't just the emotional part. What Sir Christopher Nolan says on it is that, okay, like that was a scene I was prepared to defend, but because I always assume someone's trying to make me cut it out because, well, it doesn't really relate much to the story. To me, it's the first moment in the film that we're given a strong indication that Leonard understands how to manipulate himself.
Yes. And it's also I mean, he's obviously very wounded, but this is such an act of fragility, you know? Jenny also had a great point during this scene where if you are the sex worker, this should not, she thinks he's like really bizarre and is like, okay, buddy, if that's what you want to do. But the opportunity to just relax and sleep for a couple hours and get paid a couple $100, like what is wrong with that? Like that should be the highlight of this lady's, month. That's all. It's a good gig. Being Leonard's prostitute. And the best part is he will forget that he hired you and do it again.
So the guy who plays Sammy Jenkins, Steven Tobolowsky.
Yeah.
One of the great character actors. And I mean, at first it's like, oh, it's that guy. But he is so good, particularly the scene where he is relating to Jenkins, the wife testing him by saying, oh, it's time for my shot, and rewinding her watch, and he overdoses her on insulin. And every time he sits down with the same expression, and she looks, and he has that smiling look. The scenes of him in A Special Home, he is so good, and I've always liked him as a character actor, and he's pretty good here as Sammy.
He's amazing.
Yeah, no, he's amazing. I mean, I love him in Groundhog Day. Am I right? Am I right? Am I right? He's just good at everything he shows up in. But in that scene, it had me thinking this time, like, well, how would Leonard know, or anybody know, that she kept rewinding her watch? Of course, because he won't be able to tell anybody, and she's dead, right?
Mm.
Well, but again, that doesn't. Who's to say that any of this actually happened?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
He's not.
Well, because it actually happened to him. It actually his. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes. Never mind. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's
very sticky when you try and untangle everything.
Yeah, but I think what's great about this film, and we'll talk about it more maybe with the next film, is that this is the era of The Usual Suspects, 12 Monkeys, and The Sixth Sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what Quentin Tarantino says in this quote I'm pulling from the book Christopher Nolan by Mooney, part of the appeal of Memento is he's challenging you in a game to poke holes in the mystery and the scenario and the storytelling, as opposed to something like The Sixth Sense or Fight Club, where you watch it and then you watch it a second time to poke holes in it. He's actually challenging you to do that. If you find a hole, it's almost as much fun as not finding a hole.
Yeah. And I think there's the line in Tenet where the scientist is explaining the process, and she tells him he just needs to feel it.
Yes.
And whether or not that works in Tenet, we'll discuss next week. But I think that very much works here, where it is you can enjoy it, watching it, just trying to puzzle through the mechanics, like you would say something like Primer. But unlike something like Primer, you can just watch this as a purely empathetic experience, just being with Leonard and feeling these terrible things with him. And it really is emotionally profound in a way that Nolan only occasionally gets again, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question of like truth, right? Like, would you pursue a truth if it meant that it would ruin your life, like in Pi?
Yeah.
Or what would you be willing to do to maintain your fantasy?
Yeah. And
or not deal with the fact that you killed your wife or whatever might have happened to Leonard.
And is this what we're all doing all the time to maintain our fantasies?
I'm gonna remember this recording as being a great experience, and that I was definitely the best out of the three of us. So yes, Brian, I think you're right.
You're gonna Jenkins it?
Yes.
Yeah, there's another part to this where it's I guess mentioned that same book on Christopher Nolan, that Leonard's actually trapped in this postmodern limbo. And it's the same thing as America in the 90s, where you no longer have an enemy which to fight to defend yourself. To define yourself against.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
And so you're moving into a world that's more digital with like Napster and other things. So a world that's more virtual, a world where identity's changing, and a world where you no longer have the enemy is no longer just the Russian.
Do you think that's why? Well, we'll get into Tenet later. I thought of a great example for the changing the past to change the future idea. And it's something that a lot of people do all the time. Everything happens for a reason is something that a lot of people say, or people who believe in soulmates. We were meant to be together. So you meet a lady and like she's hot or whatever, and you start flirting and there's a vibe there. And then you get married, and at some point you say, like, this was destined to happen. And then you go back and you say, if I had gone to the movies instead of going to this party, I would have never met you. And you go back through your romantic history to create this narrative where basically since you were born, you have been waiting to meet this perfect person. And that's kind of maybe an exaggerated or extreme example, but I think that's kind of what Leonard's trying to do and what's going on in what Nolan is commenting on in a lot of these next 10 films. I think Tenet is named Tenet because it's 10. A cycle of 10 films that starts with Memento and ends with Tenet.
Okay. Or he just needed a word that was spelled the same way forward and backwards.
That's also possible, you know?
Yeah, it might be as simple as that.
It's gonna. I mean, we're gonna get really galaxy brain next week with, for
boy.
Tobias. So
wait, for Tenet, yeah. Oh, wait till we get to the Batman
Tobias
films.
is gonna go galaxy brain on Tenet. Yeah,
I got some Batman Galaxy Brain stuff for you all.
I got some Batman Galaxy Brain stuff too. This is gonna be a great series.
My galaxy is slightly bigger than your galaxy.
It probably is. I have a small. I'm really working more on a Batman solar system. So
mine's like mine's a black hole. It's just like a point of singularity. It's collapsed on itself. It has no volume, no mass. It's not almost non-existent, except for it will suck the light out of whatever you guys are talking about.
That's a great description of this podcast.
But I feel like Thomas. I feel like my and Kenneth's love for you will be able to penetrate that black hole and pull the light out.
Whoa, man, different words there. Come on.
Your love's gonna penetrate my hole.
Do we need different words? We haven't gotten to Interstellar yet. Maybe that's totally appropriate. We'll see.
One interesting thing that Nolan cut out a little bit from the script that was more in there. I mean, he did stuff like condense he had 2 hotels and 2 different people running the hotels, and just, I think whenever his wife took a pass at it as a producer, just consolidated down to 1. But something else that's just slightly less in the film is the idea of hunger. There's going to be a whole section about Jenkins and people couldn't remember, like Sammy couldn't remember to eat, and the whole idea of like hiding food around the house for her husband, which just gets cut down to a line, but would be this interesting idea that Leonard would have something similar going on during the color portions of the film, but that there wouldn't be so that you have this like animalistic urge to do something, but you're not too sure if you've done it already or not. And that would tie a little bit closer into murder and the idea of like what you can trust from your insides. But it was a little bit too nebulous, and so they cut it out of the film.
Interesting.
But yeah, I think you get a little bit of that whenever he wakes up on the toilet and he's holding the liquor bottle like Ken said. And he's like, "Am I drunk?"
Smells under his arm. No, don't feel drunk. Don't smell drunk. Yeah, I don't know how Dodd goes in there with Guy Pearce taking a shower and doesn't notice him. That was a weird part that I didn't understand, how you could walk into a bathroom that somebody had just showered in and not feel the temperature change or the steam. He just takes a piss and then they have a fight. Didn't quite buy it.
I think the suit stuff's pretty fun, right? Like, I mean, not just as a time marker, like being beat up, like you have in the Following, or in the Following, where he has a suit, and so you can see which time you're in. But that he's wearing the guy he's killed suit. You don't realize until the very end.
Yeah, he's
wearing, and then all the scenes play differently when you know that. When it was like, you're walking around in a dead man's suit, and it adds that level to Teddy's like, hey man, you gotta get out of town. You gotta, like, people are gonna know who you are. You gotta get out of here, because fuck yeah, they are. You're driving the dead man, the person you killed's car, wearing his clothes. People are gonna figure all that out. And the great kind of irony of a lot of this is that Teddy's really wanting to get the money out of the trunk of that car and never is able to do it. It's like, what is it, like 100,000 or 10,000, whatever amount of money there is in the back of that car that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
He's just driving it around. All right, and then there is the scene where they all spit in the tankard of beer. to prove that he does or doesn't have a memory issue. And he's about to drink it, or he takes a sip of it. And then Carrie-Anne Moss talks to him a little bit and then says, you don't want that, and takes it away from him. One of the pieces of generosity her character has in the movie.
I think we were talking about her career earlier. And I think she may have been hurt by the robotic nature of the Matrix acting, which I think the Wachowskis asked for from her and Keanu. Uh-huh. And Keanu's obviously famously kind of wooden, and that's something that I used to hate about him, but have grown to love. But she, to your point earlier, she is tremendously human in this movie. I mean, this is a woman who you know a lot about her just by looking. Mm-hmm. You know, it's really a wonderful performance. She has like 3 scenes where she gets any kind of chance to make herself memorable, and she really sticks it. It's a great, and this scene is so like she just immediately becomes so disgusting. You know, you've appreciated her, and the small thing of spitting in the beer is like in the moment like one of the most awful things she could do to this guy. It's like a really great scene to color her character.
Yeah, she's fantastic. I do wonder about the Matrix. I think you're right that kind of maybe pigeonholed her a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, she was also, I mean, she has a smaller role in Chocolat, right? The same year. And I think she has 4 films that come out in 2000. And so like she definitely had this big bump from the Matrix, but it seemed like it wasn't enough to get her in a role that would have her like lock something in.
Yeah,
I think I heard somebody saying, like on a different podcast, like Angelina Jolie had a lock on action stars after a certain period. Remember, she's pivoted to doing more indie films, and so she was kind of like left out in the wilderness.
Well, and I think this is really this is one of the low points for Hollywood's treatment of women as far as just the number of movies with interesting roles that are eligible. And there's a whole like generation of female actresses who Ashley Judd, you know, a lot of other actresses who were coming up at the end of the 90s who either got Weinsteined or couldn't find good roles to support them, or both, you know.
Well, according to Wikipedia, she and her husband live in New Hampshire now, so away from Hollywood. She is the founder of Annapurna Living, a lifestyle brand designed to empower women through mindfulness, meditation, and devotion. And also, she is vegan. So she seems to be pretty happy. Those are all good things. And she was in the amazing 4th Matrix film, so that was a big deal. I'm just kidding. That was terrible.
We'll put a pin in that because the 3rd one's definitely the worst.
Agreed. I think the only good Matrix movie is the first one, but that's just me.
And one of the 4 things in Animatrix, I would say. But okay.
Are we done with Memento, or are we starting with Memento? Remind me.
I would like since we talked a little bit about Steven Tobolowsky, we should point out that he has a great podcast, and one that I think you in particular would like, Ken. It's called the Tobolowsky Files. And he just he's a very good raconteur, and he just tells these great stories about his career and his life and different movies he's worked on. And it's very much the way he tells the stories makes the whole show. So, and
he's a credited co-writer of True Stories, the David Byrne movie we covered in season 10.
Yeah, and he's done a lot of he's had a lot of very interesting projects that he created or wrote that just didn't get off the ground. But he was trying to be much more of a producer, writer, director kind of guy than he ever really was able to accomplish.
He just goes to prove my ongoing point that character actors in Hollywood are by and large happier, luckier people than huge movie stars.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
They all seem happier. They don't get swarmed when they go out to the grocery store by fans, not bees. Yeah, and then, you know, they get to work with all these people. The pressure isn't on them to be like the box office draw.
They always get to act.
Yeah.
You know, when you're a bigger Hollywood star, how much of it is your body that you know versus your talent?
Yeah. There's less pressure because Leonardo DiCaprio has to open a movie. Steven Tobolowsky does not.
Yeah.
So are we done with Memento?
I think so.
You know, did you ever see that Jean-Claude Van Damme Mentos commercial?
No.
I think they could have made a Mentos commercial out of Memento, and they could have had a tie-in. Mementos. You won't be able to forget how fresh Mementos makes your breath. Come on, tell me I'm wrong.
Just a quick shout out for Guy Pearce too. You know, I don't know what happened with my dude, but we got L.A. Confidential, Ravenous, Memento, in just a few short years. Like, he was my favorite actor, and he could have, I don't know what he chose to do, but he could have been so big.
Chose to go the Tobolowsky route. He's like a character actor. He's in a million different things.
That's true.
Rarely the lead or the box office draw. He's had a wonderful career. Works a lot in his native Australia. He seems like a happy guy. He's
a successful adult contemporary singer-songwriter heartthrob in Australia. He's got and he's like he's not as good as Chris Isaak, but that's kind of the audience that that's his target market. And I think he does very well in his home country.
You know, a good album title for him would be "I Remember Love," and then in parentheses, "Who Are You?" And it'll all be songs about Memento. If you're listening, Guy Pearce, man, that idea is yours, buddy.
Maybe they do a disc 2, further music inspired, because they came out with a CD for this film, a soundtrack CD, even though there's only one song in it that has lyrics. And so just like the Blair Witch Project, they're like, you know what? We could sell a soundtrack.
And they did. I bought the Blair Witch soundtrack. God, I was so stupid back then. Anyway, speaking of stupid, I can't wait to talk about Tenet next week with you all.
Yeah, so join us for part 2 where we talk Tenet. Yeah. We'd, of course, like to thank Weird AI for our theme song.
Thanks,
Talking Tenet, doo-doo. You
can follow us on the normal socials and, you know, special sites like the Arctic weightlifting site that we joined recently, Polaroids Rage. And our homepage, which is Lorac Neck, which is Ken Coral spelled backwards.
I used to when I was a cartoonist, I used to sign my last name, Lorac.
I didn't know you did cartoons.
I've done a lot of things. I've done a lot of hard things you don't want to know about. Cartooning being one of the big ones.
Weaving back and forth through the fabric of time.
Yeah, I've since recovered. Anyway, see you guys next week. Thank everybody for listening. And Polaroids, man. Yeah, I think, Thomas, you may have ruined Memento by bringing up Twin Peaks and a tape recorder. It's like, why the fuck didn't he do that? All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
You know what that makes us together? Together, that makes us flash gorgeous.
Flash gorgeous.
I'm not talking at you. I'm talking to you.
Flash gorgeous.
I don't want to hear about you. I want to hear from you.
It's 10-4.
10-4, old buddies. Destroy. Kill all hippies.
I don't hate it. I just don't know why you strayed from the formula.
You bastards. You don't know it, Bob. I'm an artist. And I must reflect that in my rhyme.
Well, now I'm confusing myself. That's cinema, baby.